Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting of the Cabinet. So for the public record, we have Cabinet members present, as well as a number of senior officers here in the room. Some non-Cabinet members are also present, and additional officers are also joining the meeting virtually online. If any virtual attendees wish to speak, they can please indicate with the yellow hand icon, and this will be picked up in the meeting. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via our internet site. So I'm going to ask each Cabinet member to introduce themselves and state their portfolio, and remind everyone again that when any speaker is speaking, if they can introduce themselves. So I'll start with myself, Councillor Pere Ahmed. I'm the leader of the council.
Councillor Sarah Williams. I'm Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning.
Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for Placemaking and the Local Economy.
Dana Carlin, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
Lucia Desneves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Ezra Over, Cabinet Member for Communities.
Ike Cutter, Climate Action, Environment and Transport.
Emily Arkell, Cabinet Lead for Culture and Leisure.
Seema Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Resident Services and Tackling Inequality.
Zena Brabson, Cabinet Member, Children, Schools and Families.
Thank you, everyone. Aisha, is there any apologies for tonight?
Sorry, no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, urgent business. We don't have any new items of urgent business. If I can move on to item 4, declarations of interest. Do any Cabinet members have any declarations of interest tonight? No declarations of interest tonight. Item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private, any representations received and the response to any such representations. So there were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on this agenda. Item 6, which are the minutes. Can we please confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2024 as a correct record? We just confirm those, please. Thank you. Thank you. Item 7, deputations, petitions and questions. There are no deputations or petitions or questions put forward to this meeting tonight. Item 8, matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There are no matters from Scrutiny to consider tonight. So if we can move to item 9, which is the draft 2025-26 budget and the 2025 to 2029 medium-term financial strategy report. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Leader. Our driving ambition in Haringey is to create a fairer, greener borough where everyone can belong and thrive. We will always set our local priorities that are fair, that put the interests of working people first and protect those most in need. And we'll work in collaboration with our residents and our communities to do so. Our budget puts funding behind our local priorities. We will build hundreds of new council homes, help hundreds of people into work, fix hundreds of roads and pavements, plant hundreds of street trees, and among many other key actions to make this borough fairer and greener. We all know that this year's council budget comes at a time of crisis. We've had more than a decade of government austerity. Public investment in this country has fallen well behind the rest of Europe. Many public services are struggling. The cost of local services, especially social care, and the cost of temporary accommodation has gone through the roof. Just this year, the cost of temporary accommodation is up 68% across London, and the cost of adult social care in Haringey is up 10%. At the same time, Haringey's core government funding is £143 million less in real terms than it was in 2010. Haringey provides temporary accommodation to just under 3,000 residents and social care to 3,780 adults and the need is rising. As a borough, our demographics are changing. We are one of the few boroughs that has an increasing population, and the number of over 65s has increased in Haringey by 24%. Like most London councils and many more across the country, we are under real pressure. We have hard budget decisions to balance the books this year, and there'll be more to come before the financial year is out. Whatever we do, though, we will make sure that our choices are fair and they prioritise the people in Haringey who need our support most. We need fair funding. We are an outer London borough. We receive less funding than some of our neighbouring boroughs. As I've said, we also have a changing demographic. The pressures in Haringey are huge. So we need fair funding. The budgets for local government needs to be driven by local need, and at the moment they're skewed by outdated funding rules. Those need to change, and we will work with our fellow boroughs to press for change. The national picture is beginning to improve. The new government is committed to end fiscal austerity, rebuild public services, and expand public investment across the country. And that is what we need to get growth and to turn our economy around. We welcome the additional funding that came to us in the budget, on the national budget on the 30th of October, and look forward to a fair funding settlement in the future. But we have to make a strong case to the new government for the resources that we need in Haringey to fix the 14 years of austerity and underfunding that we've faced. They're very real challenges at the moment, but there's also a real opportunity for us to reset the foundations locally and nationally. This year and in future years, our council budget will start with local priorities, focus on the needs of working people, and build towards our shared ambition of a fairer and greener borough. The paper before us tonight is one step, the first step on our journey to actually producing a balanced budget for our next financial year. And as you will see from the paper, we started off with a budget gap of over £50 million. However, and we still have £32 million for us to actually find. We will find that. We will make the decisions for us to close the budget. But Haringey, like especially other outer London boroughs, is facing very tight fiscal constraints. Thank you. Sorry, this draft budget, this is a draft budget, and Cabinet is asked to agree that this budget goes out to consultation, which it will do after the call-in period has concluded. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Carlin. And this consultation also includes residents, partners, businesses, and will be heard by the scrutiny panels as well between November and January. Is there any questions from the Cabinet on this? Councillor Hekata.
It's maybe more of a clarification than a question. I think you framed it really well in terms of the kind of conditions the context in which these decisions are being made. And actually, it's really incredible that we have not cut any major services in this, considering the kind of pressures that we're under. So some really great work from officers to manage those services. But I think the clarification is on the reserves position. There's some really big numbers in that, and I think when it goes to consultation, there'll be a number of people going, well, we've got general fund reserve of 15 million, with other reserves totaling 52 million. What's the problem? So I think it would be really good just to clarify what that means in real terms. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hekata. You will note at paragraph 18.18 of the paper is the section where we actually discuss our reserves. And unfortunately, although we do have those reserves, we actually have low reserves in comparison to other boroughs and for the needs that we have as a borough. A lot of the reserves are actually already required. So, for example, if you look at the reserves, you will see that we have reserves for example, an insurance reserve or a schools reserve, etc. So, although we have that 50, the NA and next year we're forecasting £43 million of reserves, a lot of those reserves are already earmarked, and our general fund reserve is sitting at 15 million, which is low, because if you look at the pressures on our budget, we have previously been able to use reserves to smooth it over, but we don't really have the reserve resilience to do that much anymore. So we could have some kind of unforeseen emergency, which is what reserves are actually for. And where our reserves are sitting at the moment, we're not in a position where we have additional reserve capacity, unfortunately, in Haringey. And that makes our position more vulnerable because our reserves are as low as they are. And they are lower where we sit within London boroughs and equivalent boroughs. We're one of the boroughs with amongst the lowest reserves available. Thank you. Tara, is there anything further that we should?
Just really to say, as Councillor Carlin highlighted, we changed the presentation of reserves for this year so that we could really see, and as you say, Councillor Hakar, so some people will look at that table and see that or that larger sum at the bottom. So we did purposely change that to show those that are committed. What I would say is that we are living, so if we look at the Q1 report that we saw just here at Cabinet back in September, it just shows that the level of reserves is unsustainable with some of the pressures that we're managing at the moment. So they are typically low, and I certainly, as your Director of Finance, I would be encouraging us to increase the value of reserves over the next few years, just because we know that risks and uncertainty is going to be with us for quite a long period yet. So just to add that.
Okay, Councillor Connor.
You Chair. Shall I read out all three questions? Yeah. Thank you. As Councillor Carlin has already very clearly outlined, there's still a budget gap for the 25-26 in the draft budget report of 32 million. So the question is, what confidence do you have at this point that the gap will be reduced without the need for you to take the unprecedented step of writing to the government and asking for a capitalisation direction, which would either lead to an additional loan and in turn increase our future debt, or would mean the disposal of council assets to fund the revenue account? My second question is, in 2.5 in the report, it states that just this year, the cost of temporary accommodation is up by 68% across London. 11.3 states an overspend of 20 million is forecast for the 24-25 budget, with which 14.5 million is driven by adult social care and housing demand. And 12.3 states that temporary accommodation prices have been driven upwards by a lack of supply. So in light of this, can you tell us what plans have been put in place to reduce the huge number of voids in Haringey, around 450, and bring housing back into use for those needing temporary accommodation, whilst at the same time driving down this budget pressure? And then my last question on this is at 14.2 in the report. The Council's MTFS position shows that, assuming a balanced budget is set for 25-26, there will remain an estimated cumulative budget gap of 132.8 million by 29-30. Given this estimated huge budget gap over the next 5 years, it seems almost inevitable that the Council is heading towards bankruptcy. Would you agree with this statement? Thank you.
Can I, before hand over to Councillor Carlin and Taryn to answer those questions, I'm also going to ask Councillor Williams and the team to come in on the housing one. So if you want to start and then hand over.
Thank you, Councillor Connor, for your questions. Your first question was, we have, as you know, we still do have a gap of 32 million, and you're asking whether we are going to be able to close that gap or whether we're going to need to ask the government for exceptional financial support. I will hand over to Taryn, but what I would like to say is that going to the government for exceptional financial support is really would be the very last option that we would want to take, and that as a council we are doing everything and looking at everything and every single pound to make sure that it's spent wisely and that we need to carry on with doing it. We're anticipating by doing that we're not looking first at frontline cuts at all. But if we were to ask for capitalisation, we have to do that work anyhow. I'm going to just now hand over to Taryn for the officer response and where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin, and thank you, Councillor Connor, for the question. So this report is the first of 3 that we will see between now and February when we recommend the draft budget, when we see the draft budget here at the Cabinet. So it isn't unusual to have a budget gap at this position in the year, so in November, but the scale and the size of the gap is significantly more than what we would ideally want to be looking at today. So there was extensive work being done over the summer, and you can see in the report today we've got 18.8 million of proposals on the table. But as Councillor Carlin has highlighted, there is significant more work for us to do. So we'd like to have been in a position here today where we were sharing proposals with you that got us to a balanced budget and went out for consultation, but we're not quite there. I do often remind myself that we've still got 3 months till February, and there's awful lot that we can do in this time. What I would say is that all of the work that we've done over the summer, and we have looked at the budget proposals that you see in the budget report tonight, but we have really focused on really understanding our pressures and particularly our demand pressures. So that work took place over the summer. So when we were sitting here, or when others were sitting here in March, we had underestimated what we thought we needed for 25-26, particularly within social care and housing demand. I sit here now and feel like we've got a much better grip on what those pressures are. And I think that was very much driven by the outturn position that we saw here at Cabinet. And also we monitor monthly our high risk pressures. So I think certainly that work over the summer really has enabled us to get a grip. So it isn't where we want to be, but I feel like we've got a really good handle on the pressures now. As Councillor Carlin said, the work doesn't stop. I often describe these reports as almost putting a stake in the ground where we have to present a position at a certain time. So even after these papers have been published, we have continued to that work. We are doing quite literally a line by line review of all of our budgets. We have to ensure that every pound that we spend offers value for money. And I don't think we are quite yet there in terms of identifying all that we could put forward. So the work has been underway. The work is progressing even between publication of these papers and when we sit here tonight. So our next update will be December, and then there will be another update going to Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 20th of January. In terms of the exceptional financial support by government, they have confirmed, or we've heard confirmation that it will be a similar process as what it has been in previous years. You know, I sit here as the Director of Finance. It really, really absolutely does have to be our last resort. So as I sit here now, I feel I've got another at least 2.5 months until mid-January to make sure that we are in a position where we can set a balanced budget without that support. And that's absolutely my expectation and what we're working to. Thanks.
We could just go to Councillor Williams-Boyd.
So I think the 2 parts of your question which pertain to me were the, just to clarify, it was about the level of voids and what we're doing about temporary accommodation. So on the level of voids, you're quite right with the number of voids we have. Of course, as you're probably aware, we did clear the backlog of voids, but with all our new builds and a lot of movement now, it's created many more voids than we're used to, because we're not used to having so many new builds. So it's a good thing. There are too many, but obviously there's some capacity issues with our in-house team to deal with those. So some of that's been contracted out. so that we can get families moved into those homes more quickly. On the case of the temporary accommodation and what we're doing, that's quite a lengthy response. So I'll just be as brief as I can. We have a project at the council looking at how we can reduce TA use, how we can get our families out of hotels. As you know, some families are now in hotels again. We have a homelessness reduction plan. We have a homelessness reduction board where all partners come. We actually had recently, last week, a very productive meeting, what we can do about that across the council. But of course, we're looking to build our own. We're looking to acquire more properties as well. There's many threads to how we're trying to address that TA problem. But as you are aware, it's also a problem faced by many other councils at the moment. And so we have to do what we can as quickly as we can to try and alleviate those issues.
So if we can move to the resolution on this, which is to agree the recommendations, which are set out on page 31 to 32. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you very much. If we can move to item 10, which is admission to schools, and this is the proposed admission arrangements for 26-27. Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you. This is an annual report that we bring to the Cabinet around this time of year, statutory requirement, which is just simply asking for Cabinet's agreement to go to consultation regarding school admission arrangements for academic year 26-27. And so it's a relatively straightforward report. The members, colleagues will be familiar with the issues that are set out in the report. Fundamentally, every school has to have admissions arrangements which clearly set out how children will be admitted and including criteria that will be applied if there are more applications than places at schools. And the arrangements are proposed and determined by admissions authorities. The council is the admissions authority for community and voluntary controlled schools. Academies are not within that remit and they're not part of this report, as that currently they are their own admissions authorities. It is a requirement that we publish a coordinated scheme setting out all the procedures and that schools and academies must follow to coordinate the process for reception and secondary transfer to ensure that everyone's offered a place. And as colleagues know, the funding for schools is based on number of children registered, and therefore when numbers decline, budgets decline. And this is an issue which you will be familiar with as we've been discussing this for several months. We have the responsibility to make sure that schools are organised in a way that help them maintain high standards. And this requires a strong budget, which is predicated on numbers. So this is a complex issue, but tonight I'm simply asking you to agree that we go to consultation on the arrangements, and there's a 6-week period of statutory consultation. And recommendations are in paragraphs 3.1, on page 81. Thank you.
So just a sort of technical question. So we've had to reduce the PAN by a cabinet decision. Now, let's say, for instance, there are a load of families. And the PAN was reduced for Parkview, and we've got the development on St Anne's, and a load of families move in there, and they have children that they want to send to Parkview, but the PAN is reduced, and I'm guessing it's based on the number of available children they believe are in the area. That's how you've done it. What would happen in that situation? Would they be able to go to Parkview, or would they have to wait for a cabinet decision to reverse it?
I could give you the answer, but I can see that the experts are on screen. So rather than give you what might be a rather flip answer, I'll ask Carlo or Jane to respond.
Yes, so the long and short of it is that currently there is capacity in the system. We are seeing that the smaller cohorts are working their way through to the secondary phase. So where we are not able to offer a place at Parkview, we'll be able to offer elsewhere. But obviously, we'll keep everything under review. We do factor in the developments within our school place planning report. And if schools do need to go to increase their plan again, we can do that immediately without coming to Cabinet for that. That can happen immediately according to the DfE guidance. But what we're seeing at the moment is that there is going to be capacity within the system, and that's why we're recommending to Cabinet that we reduce the PAN at certain schools. This is probably the first phase. We may come to Cabinet next year as well for further years down the line as well, with other schools coming online.
Sorry, Mike. Thank you, Carlo. Is there any other questions from the Cabinet? Okay, Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So are there any plans for schools in Haringey to create composite classes by combining academic years? Yeah. Are there any plans for schools in Haringey to create composite classes by combining academic years to accommodate reducing pupil numbers? Second question, in 2023, Labour rejected a Lib Dem budget amendment for a new nursery capital programme to create additional nursery provision across the borough, which would have brought early years childcare costs down for parents and potentially added additional revenue sources for our schools, which see reducing funding as intake volume reduces. So we assume that now the Labour government is also pushing on this, this council will also look at this proposal. Can you confirm if the council is in discussions with primary schools in Haringey about using additional capacity on site supported by the local authority? And the final one is, and can you confirm if Haringey is supporting any school supply for the government's school-based nursery capital grant, so they could receive up to 150,000 of capital funding to convert surplus space within a school building so that it's suitable for nursery provision? Thank you.
In relation to all these points, which I think are slightly more operational than the political ones, although I do know that we are talking to the schools about nursery capital grant, of course, but it is only £150,000 in the scheme of things. And of course, we do have nursery classes in our schools already. But I will pass over to Jane and Carlo to answer the more technical things about composite classes. You mean vertical grouping?
Yeah, so I'll take those questions. So in terms of where we already have some schools, some of our very small schools where there are mixed age teaching groups, and they tend to be the schools that are now one form entry, but in fact are less than one form of entry. So one form of entry would make a primary school 210, and we've got a number of schools now that are less than 210, and so there are composite classes already working in the borough. And what we've done is, in order to make sure that the quality of provision is good when we do that, we've used best practice, which the Haringey Education Partnership has brought into those schools to make sure that those children are taught in an age appropriate way and that their progression is still as good as it should be. In terms of the early years, Councillor Brabazon has just said, yes, we have a childcare sufficiency plan. We have to have that. So we know where we can encourage growth of new additional childcare places. And then, yes, we have been reaching out to schools around nursery capital grant and also keeping a very watchful eye on the new breakfast club opportunities.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, if we can move to the resolution, which is to agree recommendations as set out on page 81. Do we all agree? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Carlo. Okay, item 11, establishment of multiple pan-London DPS categories and framework. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Leader. Haringey operates a number of dynamic purchasing systems across London, and in fact wider than London. And the new Procurement Act coming in next year in February aims to replace dynamic purchasing systems with dynamic markets. However, the current proposal in the Procurement Act is that contracts valued below a regulatory threshold will not be able to have pre-selection criteria, and that will make dynamic markets prohibitive for smaller contracts. What it means is that if there's a smaller contract and you can't actually put in pre-selection criteria, the number of companies eligible within that contract will throw up so many contracts, and that will therefore mean that it's effectively not useful for the commissioning authority. So we have taken advice, and what we're going to do is, and the government is going to relook at this, because obviously it doesn't just affect Haringey and the systems that are run in Haringey. So what we're proposing is that where we have dynamic purchasing systems in place, when the Procurement Act comes in next year in February, on the 24th of February, we're going to extend those until October 2028, because dynamic purchasing systems that are already in place can run until October 2028. And this report seeks a short extension to some of those dynamic purchasing systems already in place, and so they can be re-established with revised criteria. And we're also proposing putting in additional new dynamic purchasing systems in advance of February on a pan-London basis. And these will support the many SMEs that access these lower value contracts through these systems. In addition, what this paper asks is that there is a London-wide legal alliance framework, and that the leadership of that rotates among the boroughs. And it is it's Haringey's turn really to take on the leadership of that. So we've been asked to act as the contracting authority on the London-wide legal alliance framework, and this report asks for permission for us to do that. There are no financial implications of that, because all the boroughs actually pay into it. So it's just really for us to run it. Thank you.
I won't lie, I struggle to understand this paper and what is being proposed. Just that's me, it's not the paper. But so just in basic terms, because obviously our procurement system is, I believe, designed for us to make sure that Haringey businesses have a fair crack at the whip when it comes to our procurement. Is what is being proposed by the government essentially meaning that this is sort of slightly upending that, and that's going to be a long-term issue that we've got to face, and what we're doing is sort of protecting it in the short term, or have I completely misread that?
Well, I will ask Barry to come in, but the thing to be aware of is that these dynamic purchasing systems are not just for Haringey. These systems that we operate are widely used, are London-wide, and further than London-wide, and are used by public authorities, not just local authorities. So these are really big systems, and some of our systems actually return an income to the borough. The fact that we're actually doing this and leading on this work actually produces an income for the borough as well. So, but this is not just Haringey based. But I will ask Barry to just explain it a little bit. It is complicated, just to explain a little more about exactly what it means. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor. So yes, I must apologise. It is quite a technical document and it's not intended to be that way. So I will try and simplify it in some ways. So essentially, we use dynamic purchasing systems as a really efficient way of managing some of our categories, particularly where we've got high volume, low value procurements in there. So particularly in the care space, this works really well. The issue with the new Procurement Act is that the dynamic purchasing systems will be effectively, they will no longer be available under the new Procurement Act. What they have done is they brought in what's called a dynamic marketplace, which the intention was to replace that. But what they've done is they put caveats in that prevent low value procurements going through there. So anything that's below a regulatory threshold is prohibited from going through that. What that means is currently with DPSs, suppliers can join at any time, provided that they meet the criteria that we outlay within the DPS. And it means that suppliers don't have to keep recreating that accreditation requirement when they apply for contract opportunities. And to give you a flavour, over 90% of the contracts let through DPSs go to SMEs, 40% of which are within the borough, and the rest is within neighbouring boroughs and outside of that. Now, what it means operationally is that if we weren't to extend these DPSs or create these DPSs, there would be a massive administration burden, both on my department, other departments within the organisation, and also the supply chain. Because every time we wanted to let a low value contract, we would have to go out and ask them to keep repeating the same questions that relate to their financial standing, their legal status, their capability. You can't do that under the new dynamic markets. So that hopefully explains why we're trying to re-establish and extend some of the current DPSs to enable us to be able to make life, I'm going to say, operationally much easier for the supply chain and also for us as an organisation.
Go ahead.
Is this something that we will be able to extend into the future to protect that process?
So currently the Act has a transitional arrangement which prohibits DPSs existing beyond October 28. However, we do know that Cabinet Office are looking at potentially amending the legislation on dynamic markets because of, I'm going to say, the feedback that they've had from numerous other organisations with the same issues. For the care ones, what we're actually able to do under the care ones, there is no time limit for care. So they can remain open. So even if they didn't put in place some appropriate legislation that would help low value, we could still continue with these for the foreseeable future. It would just be anything that sits outside of care and light touch that would have a deadline date of October 2028.
Thank you. And just for clarity, for anyone watching, you're not Scott Kay, you're Barry Phelps. Okay. Right. Okay.
Yes, I am
Thank
Barry Phelps. That's right.
You are Barry Phelps. Any more questions from the Cabinet? No. Okay. Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question at 6.17 states the council will cover in full costs for any capacity and resource to support the establishment of the framework. Can you confirm if the council has the sufficient capacity in-house already to deliver this, or despite the cost recovery, if operationally there will be any impact, for example, officers taken off other projects or work streams to deliver this? And my second question, there's only two. Given next year's introduction of the Procurement Act, the Council's current budget position and long-standing need to strengthen the procurement and commissioning processes and monitoring, particularly on delivering value for money for residents, will this be an opportunity to carry out a root and branch review of the Council's procurement and commissioning strategies and ongoing contract management to ensure best value contracts are selected, offering the greatest level of efficiency and that money isn't wasted in contract? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shall I?
Yes, if I could ask Barry to answer that in terms of your second question, the work being done in procurement is to make sure that we have effective cost management and contract management and looking at the costs, and that is a piece of work that Torrens doing. So in terms, it's not completely relevant to this paper, which is specifically about the dynamic purchasing systems and dynamic market, and about the legal services framework that we've been asked to take the lead on. But I'll ask Barry to continue.
Okay, thank you. So in relation to capacity, essentially within the procurement department, so the actual effort that's required by my team is minimal because there are some advisors which have been selected by the London Borough Legal Alliance to support this. So actually they're going to do most of the heavy lifting. What we're required to do is act as the contracting authority and to effectively administer the process on their behalf. So do we have capacity within the team? Yes, we do have capacity within the team to undertake the activities. The costs are recoverable. We've spoken to them. There's a levy that's applied to each of the commissions from the framework, and effectively that's what will compensate us. That we part of that compensates us as an organisation, along with the partners, and then. Just in terms of just picking up perhaps a bit in terms of the category strategies. So we are currently in the process of undertaking category strategies, and part of the reason that we've come to Cabinet today with the proposals on the DPS is as a result of the consultation with services around the best category strategies. And as the Procurement Act comes into force, you will see that there is much more transparency and accountability within that act than there is at the moment. And we are putting in place the policies and the procedures to ensure that we align with that going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Can we move to the resolution, which is to agree the recommendations as set out on page 191 to 192? Are we all in agreement? Agreed, thank you. Okay, item 12, acquisition of 78 council homes at the Mecco Bingo site. Can I ask Councillor Williams to introduce?
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm delighted to recommend that Cabinet approves the acquisition of 78 new council homes in the heart of Wood Green. With overwhelming need for affordable housing in Haringey, particularly for families, this acquisition is especially important. It includes 10 three-bedroom homes and 7 five-bedroom homes. These are the first 5-bedroom homes in our council housing delivery programme. This will enable us to provide much needed accommodation for those on the council's housing register, including vulnerable children. These new homes will be located across 3 buildings on the current site of the Mecca Bingo building, which sits in the heart of Wood Green growth area. This development is a key component to the broader placemaking at Wood Green Town Centre. In addition to the housing, the redevelopment will feature a pocket park for everyone in Wood Green to enjoy. Residents will benefit from private outdoor spaces, either in the form of balconies or gardens, as well as shared private gardens and play areas. Housing accounts for half of the borough's carbon emissions, so reducing this is critical to becoming net zero carbon borough. These new homes will be highly energy efficient, which will lower bills and carbon emissions through the use of solar panels and air source heat pumps for heating and hot water. And they will be ready to connect to a decentralised energy network in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Catter's happy.
78 new homes, well done.
Good news, hey?
Okay, this isn't a debate in society. Thank you. So if there's no questions from the Cabinet, Councillor Connor, who I'm sure wants to congratulate us on the acquisitions.
But of course, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So 3 questions. In section 6.24, the report states that there will be a service charge from the developer for the management and maintenance of the external areas of the site. The service charge will be covered by housing benefit or universal credit for council tenants in receipt of these. And at 9.5, it goes on to state these charges are subject to change, and only through negotiations with the developer maybe they be kept affordable. So given the national government's not taking action on unscrupulous spiralling of service charges by landowners, can the council confirm what legal measures it's put in place to ensure that these service charges will be kept to a minimum by the developer for the lifetime of the lease to prevent an ever-increasing financial burden on tenants, the council and the benefit system? And my second question is, similarly, could the council outline what its standard practices across other developments whereby council is purchasing units for council use, but a service charge remains attached, issued by the developer or landowner? And the final question is, will there be any ongoing impact on the general fund as a result of this acquisition, whether that's due to repayments, contractual commitments, or any other reason? And if so, what would this be? Thank you.
Did you mean general fund?
Revenue. So capital receipts to revenue. If there's any pressures on the revenue fund from any capital spend.
It's in the housing revenue account. That's why I was confused. Yeah. The questions you're asking about service charges are somewhat beyond my technical capacity. But it is similar to other acquisitions, and the levels of service charges are similar as well. But I'd like to bring in Robbie to give you that assurance.
Yeah, I mean, we have recourse on service charges if needed. We can go to a tribunal if necessary. So we do have that legal recourse, but ultimately, we do manage those developments. It's worth saying the service charges aren't for the whole building. We own the whole blocks and manage the inside of the blocks. It's just for the public space around the building. And so it's quite a similar arrangement to the two arrangements that we've got, Hale Wharf and some of our other developments. It's worth saying that this one I can't reveal the commercial confidentiality of what they're looking at, but this is reasonably competitive in terms of its service charge. So it's good value for us and it's good value for the tenants who'll be moving into there. There won't be any revenue impact on the HRA as a result of this.
Thank you, Robbie. So we will come back to the recommendations after the consideration of exempt information at item 21. If we can move to item 13, which is the award of contract for environmental enforcement services. Councillor Chanwani.
Thank you, Leader. So fly tipping has increased by 13% across the UK. And in 2022-23, over 1 million incidences were reported in England. Residents have informed us on numerous occasions throughout the different engagements that we have had that they want tougher action against people who dump in our borough. We are fortunate that our residents send us so many reports and evidence. However, we currently have a small team, and following best practice reviews with other boroughs, we feel the best way to increase our capacity is to engage a third-party enforcement service. Today, we're asking to approve the successful bidder and all of the recommendations in item 3. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Beth and Hubert for all of their work, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Seema. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So if this is cost neutral, as the report suggests, could you confirm how you have arrived at a saving figure for this year of 100,000 due to the contract, especially when there's only 1 quarter remaining and any income is determined by the number of fixed penalty notices paid? Second question. The council was reprimanded by Ombudsman in 2021 for issuing a Crouch End resident with a £400 fine for putting her bag collection out just a few minutes before her time collection slot. The Ombudsman also demanded Haringey refunded 119 similar fixed penalty notices totaling over £40,000. So due to these concerns, how can we have confidence that the service is even further removed? Now the service is even further removed from the council and run by a third party, we won't see even more of these unfair fines for people doing the right thing And this isn't just a new bailiff contract by any other name. And third question is, the report makes clear that the contractor will see a greater financial benefit the more fixed penalty notices they issue, giving them a very clear incentive to issue as many of these as possible. Given there's no formal appeal process for fly tipping fixed penalty notices, as there is with parking tickets, for example, how can residents trust the legitimacy of the fines being issued, and who will they go to when things go wrong? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. So the part about the cost neutral, sorry, this is really loud. I feel they can hear me in Turnpike Lane. The part about the cost neutral is because we're not paying the contractor to carry out this piece of work. So how it works is that they're going, and I can't say what it is because it's in the exempt bit, but they're going to take a percentage of the fine, and so we will have some and then they will keep some, and then that's how they cover their cost. And then that's how we're looking to meet the income target. In terms of the incident that happened in 2021, this was quite a long time ago, so you obviously were searching for one that we've done wrong, and you went back to about 4 years ago. So we do recall the LGO, and I think one of the things about these regulatory powers that are delegated to local authorities is that we implement them, and then we're governed by the LGO. And if somebody appeals and they go to the LGO and they rule that we've implemented it wrongly, then that's what we do, and we listen to that. You know, it's a learning process. We've learned from that. We've accepted the recommendations, and we went back to all our 119 FPNs. But 2021, I'm glad you couldn't find anything sooner, because I wasn't even married in 2021, so that's been quite a while. In terms of the issue, the guidance says that there is no such appeal, but we do allow representations. I personally think we should have an appeal. I think everyone should have an appeal, but ultimately that's the law. So, but we do allow representations, which is not a dictionary definition of an appeal, but it is an appeal, and people can do that online, and people can appeal. That's the beauty of it. In terms of your point about people are going to the company's going to be incentivized to find as many people as possible, I just want to be really clear here. They can only find people who commit a crime. So they're not going to go out and find people who haven't committed a crime. They're not going to look for people and say, you haven't committed any fly tipping, but I'm going to fine you anyway. So they can only fine as many people as they catch committing a crime. So if we want people to, one part of this is culture change. So people knowing that there is a consequence to committing a crime will hopefully change their behaviour, and then we probably won't need this contract in a few years' time. And that's our hope. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. So we will come back to the recommendations after the consideration of exempt information at item 22. Item 14, more acquisitions. So acquisitions of 8 residential council homes, which is on the former Hornsey Police Station site. Councillor Williams.
Very pleased to introduce this opportunity to acquire brand new council homes, obviously providing more much needed high quality and affordable housing for local people. So this is 8 homes at the redevelopment of the former Hornsey Police Station. It's an absolutely beautifully designed development which retains the original character of the building and blends seamlessly with the wider Hillfield Conservation Area. So I commend this for approval. It's 8 homes. It's in a place where in the borough where we're especially short of council accommodation. So I'm very pleased to commend it to my cabinet colleagues.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Williams. And for those who can do maths, that's 86 in total tonight. So although we haven't agreed it quite yet, but that's 86 council homes on the table tonight. Any questions from the cabinet? Councillor Carlin.
Hi, this is an 8-bed acquisition. So I'd like to know whether this will be eligible for neighbourhood moves for my Hornsey residents.
I think the threshold's 5. Yeah, so yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions from the Cabinet? No. Okay, Councillor Connor?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in the council member introduction, they talk about the homes being purchased, meeting the council standards and the eco credentials. And whilst there will be heat pumps, which is to be welcomed, there's an omission of solar panels on the block, or the ability for the units to feed into solar panels from the rest of development, which is a clear council objective in tackling climate change and reducing bills. Why was this not a condition of the development? That's the first question. And then the second question, as part of the 148 unit Hornsey Town Hall sale by the council to the Far East Consortium in Crouch End in 2017, an eventual 11 affordable homes were agreed. These homes have been completed and sat empty for close to a year, which is difficult considering the housing crisis we're facing in Haringey. So what's the council doing to ensure the absolute minimum void time for the handover of affordable homes secured from the private development, such as those that are being acquired at the Hornsey Police Station? Thank you.
Solar panels was the first question, right? I think that wouldn't have been a condition at the time that this went through planning, because at the time this went through planning, the affordable element wasn't to be social homes. So that team wasn't involved at that stage, would be my understanding. So it's a very welcome happenstance that circumstances have changed, that we're able to be in a position to acquire them. Hornsey Town Hall, that's very technical legal reasons. That isn't because of Void's contract work or anything on that side, but I will bring Robbie in for the detail on what's happening there.
Just to add on the carbon performance, it is still an 80% reduction against building regulations, which is, you know, significantly above planning, and, you know, fair compares. It's not quite as good as we average, but it's still pretty good even without the solar panels. In terms, Hornsey Town Hall is it is stuck in a difficult place between the developer and the contractor at the moment. It's worth saying that, you know, it is a pay on completion job for us, so there isn't council money that's currently sitting there in the scheme, but, you know, there is complexities on site which are being resolved between the developer and the contractor, and that's probably all I can say in this meeting.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, so we will come back to the recommendations after the consideration of exempt information at item 23. Item 15, which is the Civic Centre project, and this is the construction main contract award. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. So this item is asking for a recommendation to award in principle the main contract for, and this would be the final stage for actually getting started on the Civic Centre project, which includes the restoration of a Grade 2 listed building in the Scandinavian modernism style that I know is not to everybody's liking. It's maybe a little bit Marmite, but I certainly love the building, and I think a lot of our residents do as well. Many residents have got very fond memories of either protesting outside the Civic Centre or even in the gallery, or getting married there or registering their children there. So there's a lot of fond memories that we will be encapsulating within the building after it's been refurbished. So it's a very exciting project, and I suppose, but more importantly than that, we are going to be able to restore a functional civic hub for this borough that we can all be very proud of. You know, we hope that that will contribute to staff retention and staff recruitment, and we'll be able to accommodate about 800 members of staff. And again, even more importantly, we'll be able to free up the buildings along Station Road for future development, and
even before we developed for an income stream for the council itself. So we have examined at every single stage the value for money aspect on this particular project, and it absolutely is still the case that this is the most value for money way forward that we can do. So I know people will be very interested in that in these straitened times, but it is the most prudent way forward, and will enable us to site all of the staff in one place. It will enable us to free up the station road sites for a huge master planning project in the future, and that will be very important for the borough as it goes forward. And just to add also that there's been a huge amount of engagement with both local residents and the school and so on, but also the design has been steered along its path with through the Civic Centre Members Forum, which has been a cross-party forum. And I would just like to add here my thanks and gratitude for all the contributions that those members have made as part of that forum. So I'll leave it at that and just leave it open for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question, given the fixed price terms, what provisions are there in the contract to ensure John Sisk and Sons Limited deliver on time and within the scope of the project? Second question, how will Haringey be monitoring the project's execution to ensure efficient and on-track delivery, including the delivery of the necessary cost reductions to bring the project within budget? And will councillors receive periodic updates along the way? And third question, in reference to your options appraisal, there's no consideration of how the Civic Centre land could be utilised if the annex wasn't built there. Can you explain why social housing was not considered on this site? Also, could you confirm why you believe that an investment of just 1.7 million in Alex House would bring the building to sufficient standard to rent out commercially for £1 million per annum, and yet an investment of 48 million, well, approximately 48 million, will be required to make the building suitable for council staff to work from, which is a substantial difference. Thank you.
Could you say the last little bit again?
I could,
but
yes.
I held into that one.
Yeah, no. So, right, my paper's in the wrong way. Yeah. So, can you confirm why you believe that an investment of just 1.7 million in Alex House would bring the building to sufficient standard to rent out commercially for getting a rent of £1 million per annum, and yet we would need an investment, it's actually £47.8 million, which would be required to make the building suitable for council staff to work from. So different from renting out to sort of our own staff working in that building. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So there's quite a lot of detail in all of those questions. Obviously, the contract is at 90%, 98% of the contracts are at a fixed price, and there's ongoing ways in which that will be monitored and ensure that we bring it into. It's a constant question that I'm asking. That we're going to deliver this on time and it within budget. I'll ask Jonathan to come in and go to some of the details about exactly how we are going to be doing that and ensuring that the cost reductions and the value engineering that has already started to take place will be ensured that we actually bring it in that value and engineering. And then I think you asked a question about social housing on the site. The thing is that the way in which the designs have been made, we've got to find a way of accommodating all of our staff in the one place that need accommodating. There are obviously staff that work in other satellite buildings. The library staff will still be in the libraries, obviously. But in order to do that, then we had to design the building that we have designed with the extension
in it. And with the question of social housing, that would still be a possibility, or one of a number of possibilities of developing on the station road sites. For example, I'm not saying that's the way we would be going, but there's always a possibility of doing that, and that is much more potential. That would be a huge site that we're master planning, and we have gone quite a long way along those roads, and we'll be hoping to bring some of those plans to Cabinet in the spring about what we will do then, and all the times have to align, because obviously we'll be moving out of the of Alex House and into the new refurbished building at the end of 2026. So everything's got to align. So we're working very hard to do that. But I'll bring Jonathan in to answer some of the detailed questions, and including about, you know, why 1.7 million commercially. I think that's just to do with the short term and long term. So short term lettings and long term, if we would want to abandon this project and then rehouse the staff in the long term, it would take a massive investment that is much more costly than doing the project at the Civic Centre. So hopefully that's sort of the answer.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the fixed price element, the whole procurement has been based on transference of risk over to CISC. So the usual things around the kind of liquidated damages, etc., in the contract, but we are buying out that risk element, and that's part of entering in also to that pre-services contract agreement that we've got with them. So yeah, very much we'll be keeping them in terms of that time and scope. The scope can't actually change. That's also what we're fixing, and that's linked back to the original business case, and that's very detailed out in terms of the designs and elements we've got. The monitoring in terms of contract award, projects going through our normal project capital governance system that we have. So anything that would substantially change in any of the VE would of course have to come back. But I'd like to just give some reassurances that the work that's been done through the procurement and to date by the team doesn't impact on the business case. It is genuinely looking at value engineering of alternative materials or solutions that we've got. In terms of the like-for-like element, you'll be aware that we did a level of refurbishment to Alex House to allow us to continue occupation through to this project. And the reason for the higher value is we were doing a like-for-like comparison between the two options. So when we've brought the business case, I think 2 times prior, we were always consistent, same with the social housing. We wouldn't include housing developments and kind of opportunity costs that might come in for Station Road or for the Civic Centre, because that could be seen as potentially skewing one above the other, giving an unfair advantage. So it went very much on office like for like accommodation. So one is based, as Councillor Gordon was saying, on a kind of full 40-year plus occupation. One is about bringing in what is a modest rental level. I appreciate it's a total in $1 million, but the cost per square foot is actually quite modest for the level of accommodation it would offer whilst we're looking at the permanent solution.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so we will come back to the recommendations after consideration of exempt information at item 24. If we can move to item 16, which is the electrical installation condition report, procure the contractor, Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Leader. So every resident deserves a safe and secure home. Ensuring that electrical installations within our council homes are well maintained, safe and compliant is a key tenet of our voluntary undertaking to the Regulator for Social Housing and the Regulator's Safety and Quality Standard for Housing. This contract seeks to provide inspections, identify any potential faults and quickly remediate any issues without delay. It is both our preference and intention to undertake these works wherever possible through our direct labour organisation. And we will keep the service under review while looking to build a suitable team to provide the inspections in-house. But in the meantime, the use of a competent external contractor for such technical and skilled works is the most appropriate value for money option. Fulfills our continued statutory obligation and my top priority, keeping residents safe. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so my first question, does the contract feature a service level agreement with tangible metrics that can be monitored by the council and utilised for financial penalties for performance failure? Second question is, the report references the council's aim to ultimately build in-house team to cover the services outsourced in this contract. Whilst the contract features are effectively an annual break clause after year 2, can you confirm if there is the option to reduce the service requirement in year as the council slowly increases its in-house capacity and therefore the annual and overall contract spend? It's quite difficult just to read this out, Len. Hope you're understanding that. And the final question is, what cost has there been to the council in the failure to correct tender the first time and therefore return it, and what procedures have been put in place to prevent this happening again at a time when every pound saved is critical? Thank you.
Right. They were all quite technical questions, so I'll only speak to the building in-house capacity. And on that, it would not be a very quick thing to happen. I would, and in year, I don't think that'll make any difference. It's not something. Yeah, it would only be at the end of the term that would be looking to do that. But I was going to bring Scott in on it because there's not an SLA as such. There'll be KPIs in this, and also be checking on it as well. And then, did you hear the questions properly, Scott?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is also a call-off contract. So we would, the contractor will only get paid for works actually completed. So we would always owe the contract money. And there will be clauses in the contract for to allow us to determine the contract for breaches of contract or poor performance.
Oh yeah, when was this the second tender? And was there any cost to us? Was the third question, Scott?
Sorry, no, there was no additional cost other than the obviously officer time in redoing it. It was the tender was redone, and there was a difference in the value, and there was a technical claim made by one of the unsuccessful contractors, and on advice from strategic procurement, we closed that down and then re-tendered it to avoid any challenges.
Thanks, Councillor Connor.
Just glad it's out again. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so we will come back to the recommendations after the consideration of exempt information, item 25. So item 17, minutes of other bodies. Please can we note the minutes of Cabinet members sign in, which are on pages 307 to 318. Item 18, new items of urgent business. There are none. 19, significant and delegated actions. Can we please note the delegated decisions taken by directors on page 319, and item 20, which is exclusion of press and public. So we will now consider items 21 to 27, which contain exempt information in relation to items 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and 6. So can I please move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Can we all agree? Thank you. So I'm now formally closing the public section of the meeting.